My name is Justin Wheeler. I am iSoft Tech Support Lead here, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining another one of our little webinar series in our ongoing effort to try and teach you more about the software and how things work and how it can be better. Before we get started, just a couple quick reminders. If you'd like to chat to other people in the Zoom chat window, make sure to change at the bottom of the chat window where it says to, make sure to change it to all panelists and attendees. That'll allow you to chat freely with each other while I talk. If you've got a question or you want me to clarify something, go ahead and use the raise hand button, and someone will let me know that I need to stop for a second and just clarify a couple things for people. All their questions that you have should be submitted to the Q&A section, and we'll go ahead and handle those at the end of the presentation. So today's topic is data consistency and why it matters. And it's a lengthy title for a pretty simple concept that when you stop and think about it, you're like, yeah, no duh. But it actually has a lot of ramifications for the software, for the business, for your business, how people get seen, and how you spend your time in the software. So data consistency largely just means entering things into the software the same way every time. Which seems self-evident, but it actually starts to spiral out of control, especially when, people get busy, they have a lot of tasks to do. One of the first things that slips is data entry. And to give you an idea of why this matters to me, I'm classically trained in journalism. I got a bachelor's in journalism. I didn't actually pursue that as a career, but I spent most of my time in college having it drilled into me that the first thing you need to make sure when you're presenting something to other people is that it's spelled right, that it's formatted correctly in journalism, but in a lot of other places in the business world. If it's not spelled correctly, people automatically take you less seriously, because if you're not taking the time to make sure you're presenting information to people correctly, formatted, looking nice, that says something about how you handle your business in the first place. And so if I wasn't doing this here at iSoft Tech Support and I was actually working in journalism, I can almost guarantee I probably would have been an editor and spend most of my days reading other things people wrote and going, you misspelled this, you didn't capitalize this, et cetera, and so forth. Strangely, it actually comes into play in my current job quite often. A lot of the things that come to me as support are a lot of times when customers are confused, they can't find something. It often just comes down to poor data entry and inconsistency. And so let me give you a quick example of what that looks like. Let me pull this up here. So this is ITrack Pro, and you can see here that we have this tag number here, an engine assembly with the name of Dales. And whenever it decides that it actually wants to load that up. So you can see here, looks like a pretty standard ITrack record. And so someone has written this thing, built it, cool, it's out there ready to sell. And so someone's going to sell it. And so they're like, cool, I need to sell that engine with tag number Dales. But suddenly we can't find it. And the reason for that is because there's a bit of white space at the front of it. And then suddenly you can find it. But when you're in a hurry, when you've got a customer in front of you, you're not always going to stop to think, gee, did someone put white space on there? Nor should you have to. That's part of good data entry. We love the term fat fingers around here because that's how often things get misspelled is people are typing really fast and they roll their fingers across the keyboard, add too many characters, and something can't be found after that until someone actually stops and looks at it and goes, oh, I see it. There's a little bit of white space there. This is going to be true for tag numbers. It's going to be true for customer names, vendor names, just about anywhere in the software you can give something a name. You have the opportunity to misspell it. And if the opportunity to misspell it, you have the opportunity to waste time trying to figure out why you can't find it. And, I've had people who have used the software for years just call me and go, I just can't figure out where this thing is. And I'll spend 5 minutes looking at it. And finally, I'll be like, oh, wait a second. You got some white space in the front of it. I literally visited a customer about 2 weeks ago, started working on entering customers. And the first thing he would do when he started typing in a customer name is he would smash that space bar at the start of every single line. And I had to stop him and go, are you really sure you want to do that? Because most people don't expect to have to put a space at the front of everything they're looking for before they start looking for it. And he was like, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. And a lot of people don't. So why does this create problems for you internally? sort of like I said, when you're at the counter and you're trying to make a sale, the customer's waiting there and you're trying to look something up and you can't find it, people start to panic. Time gets wasted. Someone has to make a phone call to someone else and go, I can't seem to find tag number Dales. Do you know what's going on with this thing? And someone's like, well, hold on, let me take 5 minutes to look at it. They also can't find it. So they end up calling support thinking there's a software glitch. We take time to look at it. And then it's like, oh, it was a simple oversight where someone just hit the space bar too many times. Due to that one oversight, 3 people probably used collective 15, 20 minutes of their day trying to figure this out. And that's just inefficient, especially while your customer is sitting there watching you do all this. But it kind of goes beyond that too. If people don't do the same things the same way at your business, you're going to end up with data that ends up in different places. So for example, when you're entering a customer name, spelling it like the customer spells it is really important, because if one person spells it one way and another person goes looking for that customer but doesn't expect it to be spelled that way, well, they have a sale they need to transact. They're probably not going to spend 15 minutes trying to figure it out. They're probably just going to generate a second customer record. Now you have 2 customer records for the same customer that people are entering different transactions on. And this happened often enough that we actually created this merge button down here on the screen, because people would generate duplicate customers so often that we actually needed the ability to smush them together to just clean up mistakes like that. There's other reasons for merging customers as well, but that actually became a big one. Was, yeah, the same customers have been entered 4 times in the system and sales have been spread out across all 4 of them when you really want them all in one place. So not only does that create inefficiencies and junk data, but if you're in a position to have to report on what's going on in the system, you don't want to have 4 customer records representing the same person in your reporting, because that's going to make it look like trash. It's going to make it hard to understand what's going on. You're going to have to spend time talking to people. And then you come to the dreaded part of all this, which is cleaning up that data. Because once you've identified that you have a bunch of junk data in the system, well, then it comes time to clean it up. And that can be a tedious process depending on how long it's been going on. I'm working with a customer right now who's been with us for a very long time, and they finally noticed that on part records in their flex fields that people had been entering data inconsistently for almost a decade. And so, you know, for example, under engine assemblies, they would have things like, you know, measurement of the head or whatever, and they use text to say what these answers were. And what we found was the same answer was written 6 different ways by 6 different people. And so as the business owner, he looked at that and it literally drove him insane. He couldn't stand that the same thing that was being said about his parts was being said 6 different ways. So I've been working hand in hand with them for a good couple months, going through their stuff, cleaning it up one by one, because their operation is large enough at this point that that would be a full-time job for someone for the next 6 months if they did it. So they come to iSoft because we can do it a little bit faster occasionally, depending on how much is going on. Sometimes it's small enough it's worth handling individually, but sometimes we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of parts that would have to be touched individually by hand to clean this stuff up. All that could have been avoided by just enforcing some basic, you know, consistency amongst employees. Like if you see that something has been entered wrong, you could correct it yourself and just get on with life, or you could go to the employee and go, look, I don't want to have to spend time cleaning up data that you entered improperly because you're in a hurry or you're just not that committed to it. So that's what happens internally with your data. It wastes time, leads to confusion, jacks up your reporting, creates duplicates, and in general just makes people think that there's a bug with the software when there really isn't. It's just human error. And we're always happy to take your calls to figure out what's going on. But we really like it when there's an actual problem and we're not just troubleshooting human error, which happens all the time. So that's how it affects your business internally. But because this is ITrack and you guys are doing business on the web, it also has an impact externally. So, you know, when you're cutting an invoice for a customer at the counter and his company name is misspelled, lots of times people call the ITrack software the iSoft. And that always sticks in my craw a little bit, because it's like you've been using it for 8 years and you still don't use it by the proper name when you talk about it. Some customers get bent out of shape when they have a name on an invoice that is their company name, that is their dad's company that's been in the generation or family for 4 generations, and the dude who's selling it to him couldn't bother to spell it right. it's a minor thing. They'll probably just forget about it. But now you got to multiply that by thousands and thousands of thousands once your information goes out to the internet. So some of the same problems you face internally, you will also face externally. So for example, if you have spelled the same part type that you want to put up to HTTP, but you spelled it wrong, or you spelled it improperly, or you didn't use proper spacing, what have you, that may not be found on HTTP. It may not be able to be found by a match. Similarly, if you're putting information in the description for keywords and you expect people to look for those things and they're spelled wrong, you're automatically losing some percentage of customers that's greater than 0 who are going to look for this thing by the way they know it's spelled, and they're not going to find it because you didn't spell it right on your side. So in a way, you're losing customers before they've even seen your part record if your data isn't clean and spelled properly. And the phrase we like to use around here is bad data in, bad data out to the rest of the world. So people can't find your stuff sometimes because it's misspelled. Furthermore, if they can find it and it is misspelled or it looks bad, that reflects on your reputation as a company. I know personally that because again, I went to journalism school, I care about the written word a lot. When I am reading anything that's more than a line of text and there's misspellings in it, there's a little meter in my head that's totally ticking down that's like, okay, if I see enough of these things, I'm going to disregard it entirely because someone clearly didn't care enough to fill out information properly. And that's taking time out of me reading it to go, what do they mean here when they've clearly misspelled this word, depending on how badly it's been misspelled. Sometimes I can have to take time to figure it out. So you're sort of spending your competence goodwill with the customer when your data isn't entered properly. It makes you look shoddy. It makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. And depending on, and I've seen some truly atrocious part records where almost nothing in the description is spelled properly. And even on industry standard where, a big cam 4 is, BCIV. And they'll spell it B space C space I space V, which if you read that out, doesn't look like anything. So you're spending time internally, you're losing reputation externally. And then at some point when someone notices all these things and finally gets sick of it, you're also having to spend time cleaning up. So while data consistency isn't really the sexiest topic, and it's not the most meaningful thing to go to your employees about, I think it's actually probably one of the more important things you need to start with, especially when you hire new employees that may be new to the truck parts business, they may be new to data entry entirely. Making sure that they understand that doing things the right way the first time makes everyone's life better, saves you time, saves people frustration, reduces confusion, and then externally outside of your business, it makes you look professional. It makes sure that your stuff can be found online easily, which is one of the most important things in generating sales. And you can generally stand by pride with anything that you've entered into the system and then shown out to the rest of the world. So I think that's pretty much it for my big bullet points. It's hard to talk about this in specific detail because it's true everywhere in the software, down to vehicle tracking numbers. Like white space is the devil of a lot of data entry. As iSoft, we can only to a certain limit try and think ahead of what you do when you're entering stuff, because we have to strike a fine balance between trying to clean up things that you have done, but also trying to not interfere in your data the way you think it should be entered. So yeah, iSoft could, for example, on every single field width that we do, when someone enters something in there, we could always look there and say, yeah, if we ever see white space in the front of it, trim it off. But at some point, someone will come up and say that there's an actual business need for having that somewhere. And so we don't want to make that assumption on your behalf. So we kind of rely on you guys to enter your data the way you think it should be entered, but also trying to maintain consistency. So for example, if everyone at your yard puts a space in front of your tag numbers and that's just the way things at your yard is, that's consistency. It's not how I would personally do it, but if everyone at your yard does it the same way, you're going to have fewer questions about where things are and why they work this way. But if everyone's doing their own things, so for example, if, for example, in part configuration, let's say you're setting up a new part type to put on HTTP that you haven't currently carried in the system, but we do it on HTTP, and you go to add it there. And let's just say it's a flange housing, If someone decides to make that flange with no E, either because they don't really know how to spell it or they don't really care how to spell it, it's not going to match what's on heavytruckparts.net. It'll be there, but if you want your flange housings to be found along all the side of other customers' flange housing competitively next to them, it needs to be spelled correctly, or the only place it will be found is directly on your inventory when they go looking at your inventory specifically, which basically means you're not really competing with everybody else. You're just kind of hiding this information. So like I said, it's true everywhere. So as long as you do the same thing consistently everywhere in the software, you're going to have fewer problems than if each individual person has their own methodology for creating tag numbers, filling out customer names. Another big one that comes up, like I said, is customers, because there are various places that things can be filled out. So let's say, for example, look at the company JD here. Instead of putting it in the company name, whoever's entering the customer goes, I'm just going to put it there in the contact name and call it good, because it's JD, it's John Doe. I know what that means. But somebody else trying to pull up this sale may be searching by company name and be like, I can't find JD anywhere. I wonder why that is. And after 5 minutes of looking for it, they went, oh, there is no company name. He just stuck it in he stuck the company name in the contact name. That happens pretty often. So like I said, I could probably spend another 45 minutes going through specific examples in every single screen where you can possibly mistype something in, but it's more a general philosophy than a specific software usage thing, which is why this is more of a general talk than a drilling down into specifically how each piece of software works, because it's just a general philosophy. Spell things the way they're meant to be spelled. If that means taking the time to ask people how it's spelled, do that. I do that every day as part of my job. And we're actually doing an internal audit of our customers, and I can't throw stones from a glass house, because over the course of the last week, we have found tons of instances where things were spelled differently. They were entered differently. And we've been spending a bit of time internally cleaning up our own house. So this thing is very fresh in my mind. And it's not a fun process spending an entire day just cleaning stuff up. It needs to happen occasionally, but there's definitely better ways you can be spending your time. And if you drill it into all your employees that I care how things are spelled, I care how things look, I care that we look professional, you start making that a guiding principle for how people enter data, you're going to have fewer messes to clean up, fewer questions to answer, and blessedly, fewer calls to iSoft.